Hello everybody and welcome back to another how to play series video, and today I am going to be covering the tier 9 German tech tree battleship, the Friedrich der Grosse. This is a ship that I have had quite a few questions about in terms of how do you play the ship, how do you kind of do better in the ship, because let's be honest, FDG is a kind of difficult ship to play well, and she is very demanding. Now originally I was going to bring in a guest onto this particular video to discuss the Friedrich der Grosse, but we've run into a lot of difficult challenges that I did not foresee, and it has delayed this video by quite a few days, and it's still not fully resolved. So unfortunately we've had to scrap that idea, and today I will basically be doing this video solo. Anyways, let's get into the meat of the video, and let's first start off with the pros and cons and how it affects gameplay. In terms of pros, the FDG does have some pretty good pros. She has a very good HP pool for tier 9 battleship, the most out of any of the tech tree battleships. Obviously, we're not going to compare it to Musashi because that's just not fair. She also has pretty good armor profiles. She has a turtleback, first of all, which does make her pretty immune to citadels at close range. She has, pretty good side deck armor, although it's going to be a little bit of a double-edged sword, and I'll sort of talk about that later. The 80mm pieces that are on the main deck near the forward and rear turrets, that 80mm piece makes the Friedrich der Grosse very resistant to high explosive fire, because in the game right now you have German cruisers with their quarter pen, while those 203s will penetrate through most of the other battleship's deck armor and get HE penetration damage, while with the FDG, if they hit there, they're not going to do any damage. She's very resistant in that regard. Furthermore, FDG actually has two main gun choices, the 406s or the 420s, and this does allow you to, tailor the ship more to how your own playstyle is. 406s being better in terms of rate of fire, lower damage, while the 420s have better alpha. In terms of penetration, they're relatively similar, although the 420s have a slight edge when it comes to penetration. However, both battleships are going to have sufficient penetrations to deal with broadside targets. So the guns definitely do work, and of course 406 and above, you have the ability to overmatch cruisers that you're going to run into from tiers 8, 9, 10. She also has German secondaries, which means if you want to build her as a secondary build battleship, you can go ahead and do that. Although, I will sort of explain later why the FDG, secondary is maybe not the best thing for this particular ship. Alright, moving on, her AA. In terms of the raw damage of the AA, it's not all that terrible. However, she just doesn't really have much range on her AA guns, which can make her vulnerable to airstrikes, and especially her vulnerability to AP dive bombers does make those games kind of challenging for this particular ship. She is reasonably fast for a battleship, although most other battleships at this tier are going roughly the same speed. She has access to a German hydroacoustic, which is very important. Gives a good ship detection range, 6 kilometers, and torpedo detection, 4 kilometers. So that is definitely something that if you use correctly can help you in battle. So definitely some good things when it comes to the Friedrich der Grosse. But we do have to talk about her problems as well, and she has a pretty long list of those as well. First and foremost, German dispersion plus 1.8 sigma with only 8 guns. And that is the first thing you're going to hate about FDG, is the fact that her guns are just so bloody inconsistent when it comes to actually hitting anything. This problem is then compounded by the fact that FDG's gun arcs are just not good at all. Her forward gun arcs are atrocious, and I think one of the reasons why so many people struggle with her is that this is a battleship that really tries to tell you, like, you need to push. But then her forward arcs are just so poor that pushing is actually punishing, because what you end up having to do is you actually have to show more of a broadside, and then of course the enemy ships can punish you severely for that. Now, if you try to only bow in, you only have 50% of your firepower, which again, when you're dealing with ships like Missouri or whatever, they can bring 66% of their firepower all forward in a purely bow-on style of play. It really, it's not very fun at all. So these factors contribute to FDG's feeling of just frustration, and I definitely felt it when I was playing the ship. So you're definitely not alone out there when you're actually playing the ship and going, what on earth is going on? Oh, one thing that I did forget to mention, I should probably do it. While her forward arcs are actually really terrible, her rear arcs are not great, but they're actually acceptable. Which that suggests potentially the FTG's role to you, which is that this is a battleship that might be much better on a defensive kiting style of play rather than an offensive pushing style of play. In fact, Bismarck is actually a better pushing battleship, as Bismarck's forward angles are actually a bit better than FTG's. So this is something that if you're doing a Bismarck to FTG transition, you might be going, why doesn't this ship at times just not do what I want it to do? So now that you are starting to think about this, maybe re-examine your playstyle as well, because maybe that's where the trick is, right? Anyways, remember earlier I was talking about the armor profile? Yes, the armor is actually really thick, and if you angle it correctly, you actually can bounce a lot of shots. However, remember those poor gun arcs? Well, if you're not angled enough, any AP salvo that's slung in your direction actually becomes penetration damage. Now, other battleships, you will still see over penetrations because they'll hit, very, very thin upper belt armor and go right on through. But with FDG, you have really, really thick, even upper belt armor. Angled correctly, you can bounce everything. Angled incorrectly, and you basically immediately take penetration. So sometimes you could be at like that angle where you're thinking, hey, I should be safe, and then boom, you eat like a 12k salvo, and you're sitting there going, where the heck did that happen from? It's happening there. So the armor is kind of one of those things where it's like there's certain good parts, and then there's certain bad parts as well. Another big issue with FDG is the fact that, yes, while she's fast in a straight line, this is not a very agile ship. Her rudder shift, her turning radius, just sluggish, sluggish, sluggish. And then that makes it challenging to deal with destroyer torpedoes, and it really turns you into a bit of a destroyer magnet, and destroyers see you and they instantly think, oh look, there's something I can farm damage off of. So the proper use of the hydroacoustic is really, really important, and even then it doesn't always save you, because sometimes you do detect it and it's still not enough time to get this big lumbering ship of yours, maneuvered in a way sufficiently to actually dodge those torpedoes. So that's another pretty significant weakness. And of course the final thing is your surface detectability isn't exactly great. Even fully spec'd out for concealment, you're talking about 13 kilometers. And so you're going to get shot at, but at least with that 80mm plating on the deck, you do take less HE spam damage from shells that hit there. But on the other hand, you have a pretty big superstructure, so HE shells are going to hit there and they're going to do damage. It's something you will have to get used to in Friedrich der Grosse, that you're going to be taking damage and you're going to be having to tank damage as well. This is why I think for FTG, you're mostly going to be either a supporting battleship where you're supporting a group of other ships with your hydro and trying to do the occasional damage, or a defensive presence where you're holding down a flank. When enemy team is pushing in, you go to a section and you hold that area down, and then you kite away because she just isn't the best at pushing into stuff. Still, if you do have to push into stuff, she can do the task as well, but you do have to be very aware where things are, where enemy ship is, where friendly support is. In this particular case, as you can see right now, FTHP's Friedrich der Grosse is going to start pushing in on this enemy Musashi, and the reason why this works is because there's support from another battleship over down at F6, and that other battleship going through the island is currently forcing this Musashi to be bow on to them, leaving the broadside open to FTHP's Friedrich der Grosse. And he's going to take a shot. Now, as you can see, FDG, and it's like this at least was actually a decent salvo, but the salvo is just not the most consistent thing. However, in this particular situation, pushing in can actually go help the team. In terms of the hydroacoustic, it's also very useful at this particular time because near FTHP there's a destroyer, and so this particular hydro is going to buy him that little bit of extra warning. And also, if that destroyer is still hiding in that smoke, the hydroacoustic is going to be able to pick out that destroyer, as it does have pretty good range. Still, once FDG loses team support and it's by itself, it's going to struggle quite a bit more, like for the reasons I mentioned earlier, just these poor gun arcs that really force you to show a little bit too much side. Also, with the hydroacoustic, even with it going, the ship is really big and it's just not great at turning, and so you can still end up eating torpedoes off the bow and things like that. It's just, she's a struggle. Like, this is a ship that isn't the easiest thing to play. Also, enemy battleship in this particular instance, the Musashi, is still giving a bit of a side. But when you fire the salvo, you are really sort of crossing your fingers and hoping that RNG is good. All of a sudden, on that particular salvo, RNG looked pretty okay. You know, the shots went out nice and tight. 2 citadels, Musashi goes down. But there are other battles where you get that kind of shot and then nothing. It just doesn't happen. Anyways, moving on to some of the other topics with regards to FDG and, you know, what's viable. First things first, there's going to be 2 builds coming up on your screen right now. One is for the survivability build for the FDG, which is on the left, and then you're going to have secondary build, which is to the right-hand side. These 2 builds are interesting sort of debates to have with regards to FDG. They're both viable, and depending on you, the individual player, perhaps one or the other is better. For me personally, I like the survivability build more, mostly because I find that with the current ships that are available at tier 8, 9, 10, it's kind of challenging to try to get into those secondary ranges, stay there, and stay long enough for your secondary guns to really do good amounts of damage. They still can, it's just harder to do right now. Just think about the ships that you run into these days, right? There's a lot more HE spammers, there's a lot more of these kinds of ships that are, they punish you if you try to get too close. So instead, I prefer the survivability build. Allows me to, I guess, live as long as I can, and then during that time, output damage. I'm not saying that you need to hide in the back and be a sniper. FDG cannot do that role. You do have to support and be with your team. You do have to be in those sort of intermediate ranges where your guns are still capable of actually hitting stuff. At long distances, you're really just praying to RNG help, actually. Even at intermediate ranges, you're praying to RNG, but it's not as serious as if you're trying to hit something at like 19, 20 kilometers. So if you pay attention to this particular battle, you'll notice that right now, as a team, we are on the offensive right now. We're pushing in south into the sea cap area. Enemy team is pretty much a raid in front of us right now, so we're fighting them as a large group. There's the alternative option, which would have been, let's say, for me to actually have gone up to the A cap. Now, if you take a look at the A cap right now, there's 3 ships pushing in. There's the North Carolina, there's the Fletcher, and then there is a cruiser behind him as well. If I was to go up there by myself, I would most likely get killed and not really do anything. Even on the defensive, even if you're going to be kiting away, the FDG still needs teammates. If I had been in the position of that Sol Nagato right now, I wouldn't last very long. So since there is no help over there, my focus has to switch to the 2 caps where my team is and where I can go help, which would be the B and C cap. Still, if you take a look at my positioning in this particular battle, you'll notice that while I am actually ahead of the other battleships on our team, the Richelieu and the Yanxi, and even a little bit ahead of the Iowa over there, I am not exactly YOLOing in front of my destroyers and my cruisers. If you do that as an FDG, you are going to die a very miserable death because, one, you're a huge target and pretty much everybody's going to start focusing you, especially cruisers, because you're an easy target to hit and you can't really dodge and weave out of their shells. 2, if you're out there in the front and you're all by yourself and all of your support ships are behind you, and you want to turn away, well, then you're going to have to show full broadside. And every ship who's going to see a full broadside, that's a battleship worth their salt, is going to shoot you with armor piercing. You're very likely to lose a substantial amount of your HP before you can actually get away. And finally, of course, if you're out there by yourself, one of the other problems, like I said, is you can't even really bring all of your firepower to bear. This is a ship that, on the offensive, cannot be in the front. If you are, you have to show so much side that the enemy ships firing AP at you are going to be able to get tremendous amounts of damage off of you. So as an FDG player, especially on the offense, positioning is very, very key, and you really have to get it down right. If you don't, your performance with the ship is probably going to suffer. Moving on, and there's two other topics that we should discuss, and one of them, of course, being sort of the big discussion topic: 406s versus 420s. And why is it that these two guns, for a lot of players, just is like, well, this one seems better here, this one seems better there. And I think a lot of it has to do with what situation do you find yourself in. The 406s have faster reload, so you're able to continuously shoot more salvos, while with the 420s, you have better alpha. Now, the 406s, in terms of penetration performance, is a little bit worse than the 420s. However, I found that the 406s to be better when you are actually able to go on the offensive. Because when you're going on the offensive, you want to be able to fire as many salvos as you can. And of course, with the FDG's pretty shoddy dispersion, the more salvos you fire, the better chances you have of getting those nice Citadel hits and getting that nice damage. With the 420s, on the other hand, I found the 420s to be better when you are on the defensive. So when you're trying to kite away and all that, the 420s are better. And the reason the 420s are actually better is because when you do get that one salvo to punish, you're likely to get higher alpha damage in that one salvo. And then what that allows you to do is immediately to go back into your angled position. And angling in the ship is incredibly important. With the 406s and the really rapid reload rate, the minute you reload, you want to get off another salvo, and it actually forces you to angle less because you're just about angled. Oh, wait, hold on. It's reloaded again. Let me bring my ship back out. 420s, you get that extra little bit of time. And when it comes to kiting away and being on the defensive, I find the 420s to be better. Still, this is really up to player preference, and whichever gun you just feel you have better synergy with, go with that, right? Because everybody's playstyle is just going to be a little bit different, and some people just prefer better alpha strike. So it's really up to you. The other small thing, and this one is small, is choosing whether or not you want the upgraded FCS or the stock FCS. And the only reason this is interesting today is because we now have the concealment that is affected by you firing your main guns, and that range is to the maximum range of your guns. So if you actually stick with the stock FCS, and especially since FTG isn't great at engaging things at super long range anyways, well, you might actually say, you know what, I might want that slightly better concealment after firing my main guns. It could be a thing. Alternatively speaking, you go for the range and you then also pray to RNGesus and hope that when you engage stuff at like 19-20 kilometers, you're able to hit stuff in the Citadel by pure chance. And that happens as well. So it is one of those things that is, again, up to you, the player. It depends on what ranges do you typically engage an enemy ship at. And of course, you will have to decide at the end how you want to deal with this. Now, if you've been paying attention to the last couple minutes within the battle, one of the things that I probably would say take a closer look at is my overall positioning as well with the Friedrich der Grosse. You'll notice that I am there applying that pressure to the enemy battleship, right? I'm saying, hey, don't go ahead and give me that broadside because I'll punish you for it. But at the same time, I'm not exactly out there all by myself. I'm in a position where I threaten, I pressure, but I'm not just like the punching bag for all enemy ships. That's something with FTG you are going to have to kind of practice and work at. You really have to work on that overall positioning. And make sure you also consider the capabilities of your own friendly ships as well. So it's like, hey, where's my destroyers? Where's my cruisers? What kind of threats do they pose, and how is this enemy ship going to react to them? And then how can I take advantage of that? So that's something with FTG that you really have to do. And it's actually what makes the ship really, really hard to play, because this is a ship that is very dependent on your overall awareness, placement of your ship, all these things. And that high skill requirement combined with her just not very accurate guns can lead to a world of frustration. Which then also has to lead me to the topic of performance. At what kind of performance would you consider to be having good games, right? With Friedrich der Grosse, really, if you're averaging, and I say average, right? If you're averaging 70 to 80,000 damage per game, you're basically going to be in that very good / unicum category. Now, obviously, if you do even more damage, let's say you're averaging 90 to 100k, you're going to be in that super unicum category. And this is a ship that is obviously doing very, very well for you. For me personally, FTG is just, she's one of those ships that is frustrating. Like, if her guns behaved better, if her arcs were better, she would be a better ship to play. But she just has these inconsistencies about her. Like, she's got all these things that just don't really mesh really well that make the FTG a challenge to play. still, if you're able to survive the battle and you're applying your firepower, you're still going to be able to get those nice damage totals, and your average damage is still going to look okay, especially when you compare it to other tier 9 battleships. But with FDG, it's like that damage number has been obtained through struggle, while with other tier 9 battleships, it's not necessarily the case. So for those of you out there, when it comes to the FDG and you're just like, I don't like the ship at all, you're not alone. This is one of those sort of more common feelings that you will have when you play this particular ship. Anyhow, back to our battle and take a look at the current state of what's happening. Enemy team is pushing around, right? They're coming in from the A side into the B cap. NC is starting to run away. That's obviously okay, because if the NC were to try to turn back in, probably get citadeled by both the Musashi and the Gneisenau. I have the cruisers behind me, but I'm actually pushing in right now, because we do kind of need to stop this enemy push onto the cap. So that's one. Two, if you take a look at the placement of the islands, right now, aside from this Gneisenau, everything else is essentially behind this big island right there. And it's going to be hard for them to actually shoot at me. So priority, kill the Gneisenau off quickly and then go deal with the rest of the enemy team. The Gneisenau has like a million things to worry about, right? It's got cruisers, it's got destroyers, it's got this battleship. Gneisenau is not in a happy place at all. Once the Gneisenau goes down, now I have to worry about the destroyer engagement that's happening in front of me, the Cossack and the Xinyan. As you can tell, the Pan-Asian destroyer is still kind of healthy. The Cossack is actually pretty healthy as well. Of course, if the Cossack were to take the combined fire of a Musashi and a Seattle, Cossack is probably not long for this world. So right now, I'm going to push in. And of course, when I push in, I'm going to have the Cossack continuing to deal with that destroyer, while I can help out the Cossack and deal with these other threats. You'll notice that here's where one of the major weaknesses of FDG is. In order to get all of my guns on the Seattle and engaging the Seattle properly, I am showing quite a bit of side to the Musashi. Now, had the Musashi aimed correctly, he could have done a lot of damage to me, but of course, at this particular point in time, I still had a lot of HP and wasn't exactly too concerned. I could have taken some damage and been okay. See, immediately, the Seattle's attention now switches to me. Seattle has stopped worrying about the enemy destroyer. Attention now on me. Enemy destroyer has popped smoke, and now I'm thinking, okay, that destroyer has disengaged from the Cossack, doesn't want to fight the Cossack anymore. My concern right now is possible torpedo. So hydroacoustic on, and you really need this hydro on, because it can give you that few seconds advance notice of torpedoes, especially since that's a Pan-Asian destroyer and those deep water torpedoes. Well, if you detect them and you're in the wrong place, in a German battleship at tier 9-10, you are going to eat some. That is for sure. Alright, so aside from that, I'm basically in a one-on-one fight here with a Musashi, and FDG in a one-on-one fight is okay. Like, you actually are okay in this kind of fight. Your secondaries are able to do some amounts of damage, mostly through fires, but you're able to get some kinds of damage in. And with your main guns at close range, if an enemy makes a mistake and shows you a little bit too much side, you're able to get a huge amount of damage out of them. So in this case, the Musashi makes like kind of a mistake there, and I'm going to hit him for a nice chunk of damage there. So there's two citadels. Notice that my secondaries are still going. As you can tell, the weakness I mentioned earlier about the forward firing arcs are real. You do show a lot of side, you will eat damage. Luckily, you won't take citadel damage, but penetration damage still hurts. But like I said, on offense, I prefer the 406s. They just reload faster, allow me to get off another salvo, finishing off the Musashi with another double citadel. Hydroacoustic doing its job, giving me a little bit of early warning on those torpedoes, so I'm able to turn sluggishly, turn, and I'm able to avoid eating any torpedo damage there. Alright, so that's pretty much going to be the end of the replay. Of course, if you have any additional comments, concerns, questions, whatever about the FDG, you can leave those in the comments section below. Furthermore, if you have a suggestion for a ship you would like to see on another How to Play episode, leave that in the comment section as well. If you are going to be giving advice on the ship, please provide your advice and also a link to your stats page so we know where the advice is coming from. Anyhow, this battle is pretty much going to be wrapped up right now, as there is basically no time left. The enemy ships, the Massachusetts and I think the Donskoy, they're going to try to come back in. I don't really know why, but battle's over. I'm going to fire basically another salvo. Really just trying to get a little bit more damage. Although I will say, typically speaking, if you're playing FDG, high damage games are a little bit more rare compared to the other tier 9 battleships. But with FDG, as long as you're consistent, you should be doing okay with the ship. And consistency, I think, is the big thing with the ship. Anyhow, final results screen, 158,496 damage, sunk 3 ships, had 7 Citadel hits, had 86 secondary hits. So it wasn't too bad, 314,000 credits, although the actual net earnings is not that high, 6,943 experience, 1,780 base experience, so that was pretty good. But if you take a look at the detailed report, majority of the damage is still by the main battery guns, with only a bit coming from the secondaries. I just don't find secondaries to be all that amazing these days. And then finally, in terms of final credits earned, only 91,000. She is a tier 9 tech tree ship. Credit earnings not that great even with premium. Anyways, folks, I hope you enjoyed this how to play video. Take care of yourselves, much love, and I will talk to all of you again next time.